Those smooth seas will actually maybe inform the commissioners in the Judicial Service Commission on
Yes.
who they pick to become the next Chief Justice. Is it somebody who's gone through fire, hell, brimstone? Is it somebody who has gone through an easy time? Is any of these candidates who's actually been shortlisted for interviews for the position of Chief Justice a softie, so to speak? We have 10 candidates for position of Chief Justice. Justice Chitembwe Said Juma. We have Professor Kameri Mbote, who was interviewed yesterday. Today, the Lady Justice Martha Koome will be interviewed. Then we'll have Justice Marete Njagi will be interviewed tomorrow. Then we have Philip Murgo. Then Justice Dumanderi, Senior Counsel Fred Ngatia. Then we have the President of the Court of Appeal, Justice William Ouko. Then we have Professor Dr. Moni Wekesa. And Alice Jepkoech Yano will be the last to be interviewed on Friday the 23rd. These are candidates that are there that want to become the head of the third arm of government, and this is the judiciary. There will be Chief Justice of the Republic and President of the Supreme Court. What is it that the Judicial Service Commissioners will be looking for? What is it that the Kenyans should be expecting of the next Chief Justice?
Does the Constitution give us any assistance in this quest?
It does.
Yes.
Indeed.
And with clarity, or is it one of these ambiguous legal things that there has to be a back and forth before it's actually fully understood?
Maybe it's one of those that, it depends on your interpretation of the Constitution. I don't know. We'll speak to a constitutional lawyer. His name is Waikwa Wanyoike, who joins us now on the line. Waikwa, very good morning to you, and thank you very much for speaking to us. Hello.
Hello, Eric.
Good morning to you, Waikwa. Welcome to the Situation Room.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me.
So the first question, in fact, Waikwa, you've written about this. You have written on what the Constitution expects or demands of the Chief Justice. And that's the same question that CT has basically just asked. What is it that the Constitution demands of the Chief Justice? Does it tell us the kind of character then that should become a Chief Justice?
Yes, there's no question that the Constitution has already provided sort of what you would call a roadmap or specific expectations for the person who wants to be Chief Justice. So that's one. And we also have the Judicial Service Act, which actually has very, very specific information about what qualities you need for a judge. But I just want to make it very clear that there's sort of a difference between the qualities you need for a Chief Justice and the qualities you need for the judge of the Supreme Court. Remember, we are having two recruitments running consecutively. And so there's a significant distinction. And the other thing I would want to underscore is that you cannot divorce the qualities expected from the moment we are in. So there are also qualities demanded of a Chief Justice based on the moment we are in.
What moment is that?
The moment we're in is the moment where we have seen continuous violation of the Constitution, especially by the executive, where we've seen disregard of the Constitution, including by Parliament, weakening of the institution, constant and endless attack of the judiciary and judges, and again, especially by the executive. So it's a moment, I would say, and I think you were using very good sort of metaphors about the ocean and the turbulence. It's a moment of constitutional and institutional turbulence. So it really demands that whoever you put in that position be ready to deal with the vagaries that come with it. But maybe, if I may, Eric, let me just first of all go to the Constitution. And the first thing is, I think it's important for people to remember that our constitution, after our constitution change in 2010, there was a very big difference between the judiciary that the constitution created in 2010 from the judiciary we had before. The judiciary we had before was mostly a department of government. All the way it operated, it was a department within the executive. The judiciary we have now under the constitution is a very, very powerful judiciary. Remember, it's the only institution that has the ultimate power to question decisions and actions of every arm of government and everybody who is exercising public power, and in a lot of cases also private power. So we are talking about an institution that is extremely powerful, and all these contestations that we've been seeing arise from that. So that's the starting point. And so the person you're bringing into office as Chief Justice will be an extremely, or is expected to be an extremely powerful, or it's an extremely powerful position. So you want a person who fits that stature. And this is why you see it becoming so contested.
Waikwa, among some of the things that you wrote, an article that you wrote that we can refer to most recently, you said that it has to be an individual, then, even alongside what the Constitution says, it has to be an individual then who is not going to essentially take things sitting down. Has to be somebody who then is powerful in character as well as confidence. Could you explain that a little bit further? Against what the Constitution requires, what kind of personality this person is going to have?
So in my own estimation, there are a few things that the person has to have. So the first one is they need to be visionary and transformational. You're not coming in to be a manager in the judiciary. You're coming in to be a leader, and that is extremely, extremely important. If you don't come in with a vision, a concrete vision, if you don't come in ready to transform, then this is not the job for you. And one may ask, transform from what? And in fact, I've had that question asked to some of the candidates. It's transformation that the Constitution 2010 set up for us, part of which has been happening, but a lot of it has been stalled, especially by political actors. So that's the first thing. And that transformation starts with the need to make Kenya a constitutional democracy and to instill constitutionalism, or what we would basically call the rule of law, that everybody should be able to obey the law. The second thing is to have what I would refer to as clarity of purpose. What is your purpose as Chief Justice? What is it that you want to achieve? Not, and this is important, a lot of us may think Chief Justice is the head of the judiciary. No, Chief Justice is actually, the position is bigger than head of judiciary. It's a national leader. And so if you don't come with that, if you come with a very parochial or very small-minded attitude that you're coming to head the judiciary, but you don't see yourself as a national and to a large extent also international leader, then I doubt that you're the best candidate for that. Then the third issue is courage. And courage is connected with what I was talking about. We've seen what Justice Maraga has just gone through, being barraged all the time, harassed, and all manner of harassment, being challenged right, left, center. We've seen the judiciary threatened, including sometimes death threats. If you don't bring this courage to this job, and not just courage for a few days, this is not a job for a summer soldier, or what Loma Spain called sunshine patriots. You have to come with a full tank. If you are coming to serve for the maximum 10 years that's allowed under the Constitution, you bring a 10-year full tank of courage. You don't bring a 6-month tank of courage. There is integrity, because if you're coming to tell people these are the standards that the society has to live by, and you don't bring integrity yourself, then it's questionable how much moral authority you'll be able to assert, both within the judiciary and nationally. And I would want to discuss separately intellectual leadership. Remember, the Chief Justice has a number of formal roles. So the main one is obviously being the head of the judiciary. The second, probably most critical, is head or president of the Supreme Court. That calls for certain attributes which are different, slightly different from the attributes of Chief Justice. And top of that is intellectual leadership.
Is this individual essentially a game changer? I mean, we're looking at the judiciary and the different things that have plagued it in this country for so long, right? So, I mean, yes, as head of the judiciary, is this individual then somebody who can be seen then even as somebody with a reform agenda reformist to come in and then change the way judiciary business is essentially done in the country?
Yes, of course, they have to have their own agenda. They have to be ready to be transformative. But in relation to the judiciary, one thing I think Kenyans should be able to acknowledge is if there is one institution that has really tried hard to live by the ethos, or at least try to emulate what is required of the Constitution, it's the judiciary. Judiciary actually has been in the forefront in a lot of things, whether it's institutional transformation, whether it's judges and magistrates bringing themselves up to speed and trying to be very good judges, writing good judgments, whether it's issues of work ethics. And I would want to sit here for a minute and talk about work ethics and the judiciary. And it's important to give numbers. If you go to the Constitution and Human Rights Division of the High Court in Milimani, which is where I mostly practiced, every year the court gets about 400 petitions every year. That is work given to 2, sometimes when you're lucky like now, 3 judges. Every one of those cases will have probably 2 or 3 applications, and these judges sit, hear them, go read, write judgments, and write rulings. Compare that to Parliament, for example. How many bills passes in Parliament every year? How many members of Parliament ever introduce a member's bill, right? So when you think about the amount of work that the judiciary has been doing, it's actually quite impressive. Yes, we still have backlogs. Yes, we still have issues of access to justice, but we also have serious problems in terms of underfunding of the judiciary, in terms of the personnel capacity. So yes, those are some of the issues that the Chief Justice or the new Chief Justice will have to address. They are issues that Justice Mutunga started with and did quite a fair bit. Justice Maraga did very well on them, but they still need to be addressed at an institutional level, even before now you get into the national issues. And maybe, if I may do, because I think it's important, let's talk about, for example, budgets. Judiciary, despite being one of the most critical arms of government, is still extremely underfunded. Let me just explain this. When just before the 2010 Constitution came to place, the judiciary budget was oscillated somewhere around 3 billion per year. When Mutunga came in, he was very lucky, and they worked very hard and got the judiciary budget moved up to 17 billion. That is around 2013 when the national budget was about 1.4 trillion. Since 2013, the judiciary budget has remained 17 billion. The judiciary budget for this year is 17 billion. What is our budget for this year? 2.7 trillion. Compare it with Parliament. When Parliament, in 2013, the budget that was given to Parliament was about 18 billion. Today, Parliament has a 40 billion budget. So Parliament has seen a jump 3 times of its budget, not the judiciary. The judiciary budget actually has stagnated when you put all the financial factors that you can you put into these things, including the power of purchasing. So there's quite a lot of work to be done at the institutional level, especially in terms of strengthening the judiciary itself, but there's also national work to be done in terms of fostering the rule of law that the new Chief Justice will have to deal with.
Mr. Wanyoike, there's something you mentioned, and I would like you to assist me in understanding it. You alluded to something that I'm going to refer to as personal integrity. How on earth do you quantify this, and how do you determine this in a candidate, someone who wants to be the Chief Justice of this country?
Personal integrity, actually, it's a very good question, because how do you measure that? And what calibration do you use to measure integrity? It really has to do with your past record. It has to do with what you are able to bring on how you've conducted yourself over the years. And for lawyers, for example, their professional ethics that govern them in the profession, that is not enough, because actually we are very, very formalistic when it comes to ethics. And I have to say, even our standards of enforcement of ethics is not the highest at a professional level. So that can't be the only measure, that the fact that you don't have any complaint that has ever been filed against you as a lawyer or as a judge, that means you have integrity. It's really at a personal level. What do your neighbors say? What do people who you work with or who have worked with you say? And that is not just the people you answer to, but also people who answer to you, the most vulnerable person who has ever worked with you. What would they say if they were asked by a person when they know that nothing is at stake for them about how you conduct yourself? That is the best way to measure integrity. If you look at countries which take integrity very seriously, and when it comes to recruitment of judges, and for example, positions like this, what they do is they will actually do significant research on a candidate, not through an NSIS, which might be more interested about whether you are politically malleable, as opposed to whether you have integrity. You don't conduct this using the national intelligence, which is mostly there just to protect the political leadership. You use credible people, so that people go to your village, they hear what people say about you, they talk to somebody you've ever employed, maybe as somebody to help at home, who would be probably the most vulnerable, where you would be exerting the most power, and not just look at how you conduct yourself, how expensive the suits you wear are, or what brand of suit. That's not the measure. So there's a way to do this, and people have done it. And yes, it's not foolproof. It can never be foolproof. And integrity is both a past issue, but also a future issue. How do you conduct yourself once you've gained this significant power as Chief Justice? But there's ways to be able to tell whether the person might live up to the standards.
You have CT Muga Nduoko Eric Latif with you, and on the line joining us is constitutional lawyer Waikwa Wanyoike. Who shall I choose among these 10 to become the next Chief Justice? That's a question that the Judicial Service Commission and Parliament, and then the President will be asking themselves. We have Justice Said Juma Chitembwe, Professor Patricia Kameri Mbote, Justice Martha Koome, Justice Marete Njage, Philip Murgo, lawyer, senior counsel, Justice Dumanderi, senior counsel Fred Ngatia, Justice William Ouko, Professor Dr. Wanyoike, and Alice Chepkoech Yano, who among these will be the next Chief Justice. What is it that's expected of the next Chief Justice? And that's what our constitutional lawyer is having a conversation with us about this morning. You mentioned a number of things, Waikwa, about what you see as the key pillars of a good Chief Justice, somebody who's visionary and transformational, somebody with clarity of purpose, courage, integrity, intellectual leadership, and also that's intellectual leadership when it comes to being the president of the Supreme Court, when it becomes your court, the Mutunga Court, the Maraga Court, the next court, whoever it's going to be, or Uko Court or whatever. Who is it going to be and how shall they be? On the issue of clarity of purpose, he said that this person has got to be very clear that they are not just the head of a judiciary, but they are a national and in some cases international leader. They know that they are heading an institution that requires to be recognized and respected, and will interact with very many others. And I think this is a very critical one for me if I look at it. Like you said, over the years, the judiciary has not been well funded. The full operationalization of the judiciary fund has not happened. The constant, rubbing of shoulders and knuckles, and in very many cases, bare knuckles, between the judiciary and the other two arms of government will require somebody who can navigate these choppy waters very well. Now, the purpose with the person with clarity of purpose, there are very many instances where people have said they want somebody who is fiery, who, fights, who gets into the mud and screams and bites and does everything. Is that necessarily it? Or do we need just somebody who is very diplomatic in how they handle things?
It's not about being fiery. It's not about a show. It's not about drama. That's not what you bring as a head of the judiciary. And maybe I should add, related to the clarity of purpose, is you have to be politically astute. When you head an arm of government, but also you are a national leader, you have to know how to navigate the political and other terrains every day. So, for example, now we've had this standoff between the judiciary and the executive on the appointment of the 41 judges, now 40 judges, since July 2019. How do you navigate that? But how do you navigate that without compromising the independence of the judiciary? How do you navigate that without compromising the Constitution? The quick and easy way is to say, I'll negotiate with the executive and see what they say. Yes, of course you have to talk to the executive. I'm not sure you negotiate with the executive because it's a constitutional edict or requirement, but it's how you go about it. How do you get that unstuck? How do you do that without being seen to bend backwards too much and making the judiciary look fickle? How do you negotiate around issues of disobedience of court orders, including by the president, who's become the biggest when it comes to disobedience of court orders? How do you do that? Or how do you ensure that you are instilling rule of law when it seems like even the Attorney General or the Office of the Attorney General is not necessarily supporting you in your quest for instilling the rule of law, and especially when it comes to court orders. And yet you have to be working with all these institutions every day.
Let me ask you this question, sir, if I may.
Yes.
In the list of qualities that we are talking about and hoping and presuming would be embedded in this particular personality who could be our Chief Justice, where in the order of things, is there a priority for people skills? Because I'm listening to you talking, and that's why I had to interrupt you. There is need for somebody who actually has people skills, because to be able to navigate through these things, it's not just a question of knowing the law and being able to state it. No. But being able to get people to see your point of view so that they actually side with you when they need to.
Yes. In fact, when I started, I said there's a distinction between the qualities you need in a Chief Justice and the qualities you need in a judge of the Supreme Court. A judge of the Supreme Court can be somebody who is happy to lock themselves into a room and just read volumes and volumes of book, and occasionally go and sit in court and ask a few questions, and then retreat back into their room, and that is mostly fine. And you can't do that as Chief Justice. You're everywhere. You have to interact with people you like. You have to interact with people you don't like. You have to interact with people who you know are working day and night to stall whatever you're working on, or to just undermine, but you still have to work with them. In fact, one of the qualities that you must have is the quality of self-esteem, because that's what actually allows you to stay on your mission and not feel belittled, and not be too concerned about how people carry themselves, but you are able to focus and push your agenda. So, but at the same time, you are also heading, I think the judiciary has at least about 5,000, if not more, staff. And you have to inspire them. You have to create or foster a culture in that space. So if, again, you don't have people skills, including how you develop an institution or culture, and how you encourage people to be ethical, to be productive, this is not a job for you again. And if I may, because I say there is a distinction between Chief Justice and the Supreme Court. Again, Chief Justice is the head of the Supreme Court. Our Supreme Court has two problems at the moment. The first one is, and we've had a bit of this during the interview, is that people still believe, and I think it's a true belief, that our Supreme Court has not become authoritative enough. And Supreme Court becomes authoritative based on the kind of jurisprudence they're able to churn out, and how respected that jurisprudence is, not just in Kenya, but regionally and globally. That's why all of us talk about the Constitutional Court of South Africa, because their jurisprudence is not just consumed in South Africa, it's consumed everywhere in the world. You see it being cited in cases in the United States, in Canada, in almost every country. We've not done very well on that, and that is one of the challenges that the Chief Justice has to deal with. How do you make that court authoritative? How do you make it consistent? How do you make it respected? That's one. The second thing, which is also tied to the authority and credibility of the Supreme Court, our Supreme Court, and we may want to bury this in the sand, is not constitutionally compliant. It's still not two-thirds gender compliant. And whether the Judicial Service Commission achieves that through the appointment of Chief Justice of the Supreme Court judge, I would say they are lucky. They have two positions they can use to be able to comply with that. And that, the fact that the Supreme Court itself has a problem in terms of its own compliance with the Constitution, it's problematic. And that will have to cascade down even to other positions, whether it's Court of Appeal, High Court, magistrates. Luckily, I think those other courts are doing much better than
this particular
the
one.
Supreme Court.
You know, when I listen to you speak, Waikwa, and even looking at what has been said before, yes, a Supreme Court that stands out to be counted, the Supreme Court whose decisions and jurisprudence is actually going to be quoted and will go down in the annals of history. And then on the other hand, the character that's required of the person who is the political and administrative head of the judiciary, chair of the Judicial Service Commission, president of the Supreme Court, and Chief Justice, I get a feeling we stand to lose the qualities of one and gain the qualities of the other. Those two may not necessarily go hand in hand. That somebody who is going to make sure that they lead their court in a way that delivers a kind of jurisprudence that we are talking about, while at the same time playing the political game of managing this institution with all the judicial officers and other people who work in it and their relations with the other arms of government. Do you think maybe, and this is just off the wall here, that there could be an opportunity, maybe even in future, to separate those two? So the head of the judiciary is not necessarily the president of the Supreme Court.
Yes, we can wish what could be done in the future. And yes, I agree with you, Eric. It's a very heavy job. We forget, actually, there is another responsibility that the Chief Justice has. He or she is the chair of the National Council on Administration of Justice. So the work is a lot. But we have to work with what we have. We won't be amending the Constitution, so all these jobs will remain to be jobs of the Chief Justice, at least in the foreseeable future. So then how do you make sure that you get a person who is not shortchanging any of those? And for me, it just comes down to leadership. Think about it. If you have a good, credible leader and somebody who is clear on their purpose, who is visionary, and thinking about them as the president of the Supreme Court. Remember, the Chief Justice doesn't do all the work, all the writing in the Supreme Court. What you need to provide there is leadership. It's not that our judges at the Supreme Court are not good judges. They are good judges. Maybe what is required there is just clarity. And so if you bring leadership to that space, maybe everything changes. But you also have to bring the respect, because if the other judges, whether it's at the Supreme Court or other courts, don't respect you, then it's hard to even lead or to be authoritative. So it's the package of leadership and the package of personal characteristic that you bring to the job that will make you either successful or not successful.
It seems that this individual, regardless of who they are, Waikwa, I mean, with some of the things that you've mentioned, that there are already existing barriers to how well this person will be able to perform. Some of the things that you talked about, that you can't really talk about full independence of the judiciary because they don't control the purse strings, first of all. Secondly, you're saying you're dealing with an executive that doesn't obey court orders and things like that. That is already something that has been set, it has been witnessed by their predecessor. It doesn't, so it seems as though some of these characteristics or traits or strong gaits that this individual must have, really, they would already be met by some pre-existing hurdles to be able to expend their duties properly. How do you think that this would change? Would this be an individual who would then be able to come in and change some of these things that we see? Demand for some of the things that ought to happen, proper funding of the judiciary, demand for other things that they feel need to happen according to law, reigning in the executive, for example. Do you think those are things that could happen in the next tenure, in the future tenure of Chief Justices in Kenya?
Yeah, and those are the things that excite visionary leaders. Challenges are what actually molds leaders. It's tough, but not insurmountable. And the lucky thing is actually the judiciary has a lot of tools to be able to undertake or to make sure that this happens. Some of those tools is the judges, for example. We know that we have very, very good judges, especially at the level of the High Court. We have quite a number of judges at the High Court who are very, very courageous, but also very intellectually deep. And so, and we know that one way that you reform or transform a country is by making sure that the judiciary gets engaged and sees its power as power not just to resolve dispute and the judge goes home, but a power that allows it to map out what is the role of the judiciary in transforming society. Think about it, for example. For a Kenyan out there who is not a lawyer, who doesn't interact with the judiciary every day, what do they want from the judiciary? Or what would they expect that the judiciary does for them? They care more about how does the judiciary function in a way that advances their socioeconomic welfare. What happens, for example, when they go home? Should they go home worrying that somebody is going to come and demolish their house in the middle of the night? Because after all, if you get court orders, those court orders will not be respected. And so for a person like that, the best way for judges to be able to assist them is to think about creative ways to force a recalcitrant executive from not violating court orders, making it much more expensive. And the judiciary has those tools. The thing, though, is if you have a set of tools, but you don't have the courage and you don't have a leader who is helping you foster that courage to use those tools, then you won't use them. And that is our paralysis at the moment. That because there is so much attack on the judiciary and judges get attacked at individual level, and sometimes there is not sufficient protection, either within the judiciary or by the groups that should be supporting judges. Judges are shy to come out. If your leadership is courageous, it starts there and gets a lot of things moving. And judges can be creative, judges can be more authoritative, magistrates can do much more, and they can do the right thing and not be used sometimes by the executive to advance its vendetta against individuals. So yes, it's very, very complex, but at the same time, I think it's something that's doable if you have the right person, but it's not just one person.
Mr. Waikwa, is this not the reason why we separate these institutions within our setup? That's why you have the executive, you have parliament, then you have the judiciary, because it's, I think, based on the understanding that the executive will always want to exert their power. They will always want to have their say. But how then is it, let me ask the question, is it then possible to have a situation where the executive doesn't seek to influence not just the judiciary, but also the appointment of an individual that will lead the judiciary? Because this particular executive has been accused for the longest time of always seeking to have someone who is, should we say, sympathetic to their views on how things should move. How do you ensure that this speculation that we keep talking about isn't actually enacted? Because if it isn't acted on, then it means the judiciary and the executive will be one and the same thing.
Yeah, Charles, that's actually quite important. By the way, Kenya is not unique. Every executive, nearly every executive in the world wants to control the judiciary, wants to influence the appointments, and especially of senior judges, Chief Justice. Let me give you an example. South Africa, when the current Chief Justice was nominated by President Zuma, the current Chief Justice Mogoeng, a lot of people actually thought that the reason Zuma went for Mogoeng and bypassed very senior judges, Mogoeng was one of the junior most judges at the Constitutional Court, is because Zuma believed that Mogoeng was malleable and would do what Zuma wanted. And what has since happened is Mogoeng became Chief Justice, but because of his own personal integrity, personal courage, he was able to direct his loyalty to the right institution and the right things, which is the Constitution. Zuma ended up facing a lot of problems with the Constitutional Court because every violation that was reported to the Constitutional Court would rule based on the law. That is possible in Kenya. And this is why it's also a bit difficult, because while we pigeonhole and profile people and say, oh, so-and-so maybe might not do so well because of reason A or B, you never know until the person is there. Even the people who are trying to stay up very late, trying to push for their candidate, you never know what your candidate will do. And that's why it comes down to also the character of the person, because once you are there, you are entrusted with that institution, but you're also entrusted with protecting the Constitution. And regardless of who sort of helped you or who campaigned for you, you have to understand what your first responsibility is, which is to the Constitution and to the institution of the judiciary and the rule of law.
Waikwa, just looking at the candidates and looking at the candidates for this particular job and the one for judge of the Supreme Court, do you see, just, the bottom of your heart, do you see the Judicial Service Commission picking a candidate independently without any external influence? Putting you on the spot here, but yeah.
I am not, I wouldn't be so naive to think that there is not a lot of lobbying happening. I believe there is a lot of lobbying happening, and sometimes in almost nefarious type of way. At Judicial Service Commission level, by the way, there is individual, institutional, political interest that big people bring to that space. Can I expect that the person who will be chosen through just a democratic and individual vote of each of the members of the Judicial Service Commission without influence? I'm not so sure, but I think Judicial Service Commission is mature enough to know the responsibility on them, and in fact, they've done this in the past, and we have no reason to doubt that they won't do this, and to actually end up giving us the best candidate. They may get it wrong, but even if they get it wrong, but they have tried, and they've tried to be true to their oath of office, then that's understandable. The only problem is when you know they are doing it to please or to keep a deal with somebody. And I hope that doesn't happen.
Thank you very much for speaking to us this morning, Waikwa. Wanyoike is a constitutional lawyer. Asante sana for joining us. We hope to speak with you again soon.
Asanteni.